All right, Daf Yud Zayin. Picking it up from the Mishnah on Tez Zayin Amud Beis. Look, the Mishnah, important line here. Ma bein tam lamuad, ela shatam meshalim chatzi nezek megufay, umuad meshalim nezek shalim mino aliyah. So the tam is only going to pay up to the value of itself, meaning the value of that animal that did the damage, whereas a sharamud will pay beyond its own value to actually match the value of what it damaged. Now, my aliyah, for the Gemara, was this lashon of minho aliyah. It's a strange word. Omer Rabbi Lazar, b'ma'ula shemin nechasav, like the equivalent of the idis. You got to pay from the good stuff. B'cheinu Omer also says in Divrei Yamim, Yishkav Chizkiyo imavaisav yikberu b'malei kivrei b'nei David. So they buried him in the malei b'nei David. So what's the malei? V'omer Rabbi Elazar b'malei means eitzel ma'ulim shebimishpacha. They buried him in the Gresta plots. Umay ninhu, and who were those chashivs to people in that burial plot? David ushlomo. Another member from Rabbi Elazar, v'yikberuhu b'kivraisav asher karalei be'ir David v'yishkavuhu b'mishkav asher milei samim uzanim. So they buried King Asa. This is talking about, and he was a good king. He was buried with besamim and zanim. What does that even mean? So my besamim uzanim. So Rabbi Elazar Aimer zine. These are different kinds of besamim. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar, besamim shekol ma'riach behen ba lidei zima. These besamim were so good that they would bring a person to even come to Aveira because they would be so intoxicatingly, awesomely smelling. Pasuk says, Ki charu shucha lelachdeni upachim tomnu l'raglai. So this is Yirmiyahu Navi complaining that the people were giving him problems because he was giving musar to the people, and in order to kind of deflect the musar, they would accuse him of Aveira. They would accuse Yirmiyahu Navi. So Yirmiyahu says they dug a pit for me and they tried to trap me. So Rabbi Elazar Aimer, shechashduhu mizayna. They kind of were chayshid that I was with a zayna. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar, shechashdu me'eshes ish. But either way, that's obviously no good. So for Mar Bishlam l'mad Amar shechashdu mizayna, that's how you understand the pasuk. Hanu d'chsiv ki shucha amuka zayna. Pasuk uses this bar as a mashal for a zayna getting trapped. El l'mad Amar shechashdu me'eshes ish. So my shucha. Why did Yirmiyahu say a shucha pit? For the Gemara, otu eshes ish l'minafka mechlal zayna, and eshes ish is also the same idea as the zayna, the same kind of taiva. So the bar is still an apt mashal for that. Now Bishlam l'mad Amar shechashdu me'eshes ish. I get it. Hanu d'chsiv v'yato Hashem yodata eskol atzasam olai lamaves. That there's an aspect of misa if a person is mizana with an eshes ish, because that's a chi of misa. El l'mad Amar shechashdu mizayna. So my lamaves, which the Gemara says, shishlichu leve'er tit. They actually put him into the bar, which was very much life-threatening situation. Darash Rava Mai Dichsiv, Yu muchshol lefanecha be'es apecha asei bohem. You see, Yirmiyahu is asking Hashem to have these people who are giving him a hard time to let them have a michshol at the time of Hashem's anger. So Amr Yirmiyahu lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribbon Shalom. Afilu b'shasha oisin tzedakah. Even when they try to do tzedakah themselves, hechshilim b'vnei adam she'enim hu ganim. Give tzedakah to people who don't deserve the tzedakah, to fakers. Kadesh lo yikablu aleim schar. So this way they don't get schar because they're not really giving it to people who need it. Which is interesting on multiple levels. First of all, the fact that you can daven that people should not get schar for something. And also, is that really true that if you give tzedakah to somebody who doesn't deserve the tzedakah, you don't get schar for it? So it sounds like that from the Gemara. The Nemuka Yosef over here says, no, the truth is, Avada, you would get schar. So what Yirmiyahu is davening for is that the real Yedua fakers should be the ones asking for the tzedakah. So if you're forced to give tzedakah, you know that you're giving a tzedakah to someone who isn't supposed to be collecting it. But Rav Elchanan in the Kavitz Ha'aris, in the back, in his Perush on Agada in Siman Gimel, discusses that there's two dinim in every mitzvah and every avera. There's the actual tikkun and the product that comes out of the mitzvah, or the takala that comes out of the avera. That's one aspect, the result of your mitzvah and avera. And there's also the aspect of listening to what Hashem said by a mitzvah, what Hashem said by not doing the avera. Those things independently can exist. And it's going to have enough kamina for mitzvahs strichas kavana, because that'll only be attached to one of those two things. So Rav Elchanan explains this Gemara that Yirmiyahu is davening that they shouldn't have that mile of the tikkun that'll come out of their mitzvah because the person who's receiving tzedakah didn't need the money. He was faking. So mitzad the fact that I'm listening to Hashem, that I'm trying to do what he said, okay, so I did the best I could, but I'm not going to get that mile of the tikkun. I seem to remember a Vilna Gaon in the beginning of Baba Basra by the tzedakah Gemaras over there on Daf, Zayin Ches, also about someone who's faking. There is some sort of schar that you're going to get, even though you didn't technically give tzedakah because he didn't need it. But sorry, I don't remember exactly the Maramokam. Okay, back to the kfura of Chizkiah. The kavod asulei b'maisai malamed shahishivu yeshiva al kivrei. They actually made a yeshiva. Chizkiah brought so much Torah to Klal Yisrael, so when he died, they made a yeshiva by his kever. Question is, can you learn Torah right by a dead body? Taisa says it can't be because that would be leig la rush. As we know, you're not supposed to have your tzitzis exposed when you're in the Beis HaKvaros, and therefore Avada there was a richuk of Dalad Amos. This is Taisa up on top on Amud Aleph. But then Muki Yosef points out that it's not true. Take a look. People say Tillim all the time by a kever, and the idea is because you're not allowed to learn or do mitzvahs for yourself. But if you're doing it for the covenant of the mace or you're doing it for the schus of the nifter, then Avada it's okay. And therefore he learns kipshuta. They actually built the yeshiva right by his kever. Pligi bar Rabbi Nasan virabon and Chad Amar Shleisha. One says it was there for 3 days. Moving over to Amud Aleph, v'Chad Amar Shiv, and one says it was there for the whole shiv. Amri la shleishim, and some say it was there for the whole shleishim. Tan Rabbanan v'chavayd asu li b'maisai. Zechizki Melech Yehuda Shiatzel Lefanav Shleishim V'Shisha Elef Chalutze Kasef. 36,000 people went out with their bared shoulders, which was, the minig back in the day to expose their shoulder as part of their Avelis. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Loi Rabbi Nechemya V'Haloi Lefnei Achav Asukain. Didn't they do the same thing in front of Achav, who was very bad, and therefore it wouldn't be such a mile that they also did this for Chizkiah. Ella, different pshat, rather Sheinichu Sefer Torah al Mitosai. They actually put a Sefer Torah on his aron. This is bothered that you can't even put a Sefer Torah on a seat, because it's not coveted for the Sefer Torah. So how could they put it on his aron? And Taisus just says that, well, Chizkiah was different, so they made an exception for him. But the truth is, you can clear what the problem by a Sefer Torah is. Is it a bizayin for the Sefer Torah, or is it a problem of loig larush? And that would make me, and over here, this wouldn't be a problem of loig larush, as we were saying, because you're doing it for the covet of the mace. Anywho, they put the Sefer Torah by Chizkiah. Amru kiyem zeh mashakasa bazeh. He fulfilled everything that was in this Torah. And now today we do the same thing, which of course we don't. But back then, this Mana Gemara, apparently they took out a Sefer Torah by a kfura of a Adam Gadol. And for the Gemara, afuki mafkinan anuchi lemenchinan. We take out the Sefer Torah, but we don't actually put it down by the aron. And of course, that was something specific they did by Chizkiah. Anuchi nami menchinan. Maybe even today we'd put it by the aron, but kiyem le'amrin. But we don't have the chutzpah to say that this person did the whole Sefer Torah there, and they were Makayim everything. I was going to Rabbi Yochanan to ask him a shaila about this whole inyan. When Rabbi Yochanan went to the bathroom. And when he got back, I asked him the shaila. He didn't answer until he washed his hands and he put his tefillin and made a bracha. And then he said, we would even say this person was Makayim everything in the Torah. But we wouldn't say another word. We wouldn't say v'limed le'amrinan. We didn't say he taught it. So what do you mean we wouldn't say that he taught? It's even better to be learned, to learn the Torah. So lekasha hala migmar hala agmure. This idea that shaliman maybe lidemaisa, that's only for learning Torah. But when we say he was Makayim it, but we don't say he taught it, that's referring to the teaching of Torah. It's a little hard to understand how to read this Gemara. Like, which way does it cut? Which one's better, the learning or the teaching? Rashi clearly learns it's the teaching is more chashiv. But Taisus seems to say it's the other way around, that the learning is more chashiv. And you can take a look at Rav Zilberstein, who also talks about this often discussed topic of someone who has the ability to teach, but he knows if he's learning on his own, he would accomplish much more in his own personal learning. What should he do? And as you can imagine, the psak is always that you should do the Talmud Torah, the Rabbim. It's more important to teach. Rav Preda was an example of that because he taught 400 times to his Talmud. Because don't you think Rav Preda would have done a lot more learning on his own if he wasn't so busy teaching 400 times the same thing? But there's a lot of siyata d'shmaya for that machanech, for that Torah, and therefore, as is evidenced in that Gemara by Rav Preda, so it's always better to teach the Torah. And now we end the parak. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rishim Ben Yechai, Mai Dechsev Ashreichem Zorei Al Kol Mayim Mishalchi Regel Hashar V'Hachamar. So Kol Isaac B'Torah Gemilas Chasodim Zeichel Nachlas Shnei Shvatim. You get both Shvatim, meaning the Mila of Yosef and Yisachar. And then we break it down. Shenemar Ashreichem Zorei. It's praiseworthy the people who are planting. Ve'in Zriya El Tzedakah. Shenemar Ziru Lachem Tzedakah V'Kitzru Lefi Chesed. Ve'in Mayim El Torah Shenemar Have Kol Tzami Lechu L'Mayim. Zeichel Nachlas Shnei Shvatim, meaning Yosef and Yisachar, because Zeichel Lekila Ki Yosef. You get to have that that chuppah, which means that covet that Yosef had. Tichsev ben Peiras Yosef b'nais tza'ada alei shur. The zeichel nachlas Yisachar, meaning that which is Ashirus. Tichsev Yisachar chamar garim. Even though we popularly know Yisachar as the Torah learner, but as the Targum brings, that Yisachar had a lot of properties and money. Ista Amri oivav neiflum lefonav ki Yosef. His enemies will fall like they did in front of Yosef. Tichsev behem amim yenagach yachtav afsei aretz. The zeichel abina ki Yisachar. He'll have that understanding that Yisachar had. Tichsev ubnei Yisachar yoydei bina liitim l'das ma yasa Yisrael Hadron Allah Arba Avais. And now we get to start the second parak of Bava Kamma. Keitzad haregel mu'edis, the av hanizik of regel. Legabe, what is it considered a muad? In other words, what's normal for the regel to do? L'shaber b'derech hilucha. When it walks, it breaks things. Habehema mu'edis lahalach kidarku l'shaber. Because a behema is a muad, klape, breaking things that are in its path when it's walking. Haisim evaetis. But if the animal's kicking, oisha utzroiris menatzim mitachas ragleh, or things are shooting out, yeshavr es hakelim, mishalim chatzi nezek. Right? Chatzi nezek is for tzroiris. We're going to see in the Gemara, of course, as Sumchus argues with that, whether it's chatzi nezek or nezek shalim. Darsa ala kliva shivartai. If the animal steps on a keli and breaks it, v'nafel al kliva shavra, and that broken piece of that first keli falls on a second keli and breaks that, ala rishon mishalim nezek shalim, which was the normal thing. V'al achar mishalim chatzi nezek. Because that secondary hezek is always going to be like that in tzreiros. Hatar negailin, chickens, muadin lahalach kedarkan l'shaber, they break things, and that's also considered normal. Hoya delil kosher baraglav, if something is tied to its legs, oish hoya mahades, or it's hopping umishaber sakelim, and it breaks kalim. Mishalim chatzi chatzi nezek. So even though it's normal for chickens to do that, but that's all considered tzrayros because it's secondary, and therefore you only pay chatzi nezek. So turning over to Talmud Beis, says the Gemara, Amar le Ravina le Rava, Hainu regel, hainu behema. Isn't regel the same thing as behema? What does one add to the other? Amar le Rava answers Tana avos with Tani toldos. The first thing is regel, and then we have the subcategories of toldos afterwards. For the Gemara, if that's true, we have to contend with the Mishnah coming up on Daf Yotes. Elamiata seifa diktani hashein muedes habehema muedes, that the Mishnah is going to list about a shein, which is mued, and then it's going to list about fruits and vegetables. So my avos, my toldos ika. You can't tell me that fruits and vegetables are a tolda. That's just the description. It's not it wouldn't follow the same structure that we're trying to suggest now for this Mishnah of avos and toldos. So So Rava responded with one of his hilarious jokes. I answered one, now you answer one. So Rava's telling Ravina, okay, let's hear what you can say. You give me an answer. So for time of Maya, what's takapshat on the Mishnah on Yud Tes? Omer Rav Ashi Tana Shein Lechaya V'Katani Shein De Behema. The pshat in that redundant lashon in the Mishnah on Yud Tes, talking about two different kinds of animals. A chaya and a behema are two different things. Salkadei Dechamina, why would I think otherwise? Because it says in pasuk V'Shilech Hasa Be'ir Ksiv Behema in chaya loy kamashmal and the chaya b'chalal behema. It's interesting what the havamina would have been, that you would have been putter. I mean, what's the but lakal panim? There are two different animals and they require their own chiddush. So the one that's beferish in the pasuk, meaning a behema, that's the one that should be listed first because that's the ikr, and then the additional one, the chiddush one, should be second. So it should be behema and then chaya. And for the Gemara, had the isale midrasha chavivale, that which the Tana came up al yidei drasha and echanami, he puts it first because it's chaviv to him. Ihachi reisha nami lisni hahi delek siva bereisha. So what about in our Mishnah, the part that's not beferish in the Torah should be listed first because it's more chaviv? Meaning, why does it say Kate said haregel muedis and then behema muedis? Behema should be first because we're learning that the behema is a reference to the tolda, which is not beforish. The Gemara says hachi hashta asam idi avos. No, really, the truth is both of them are avos. Both the chaya and the behema are both avos. But hach the isale midrasha chavivale. But since a chaya comes al yedei drasha, it's chaviv. Hacha shavek avetani tolda. But here, by the beginning of the Mishnah, the chavivus wouldn't be enough of a reason to put the tolda before the av. Or iboy yasema, I did desolek mi regel pasach beregel. We ended off the previous Mishnah before that with regel, so therefore that's why we started off with regel. Tana rabbanan behema muedes lahalech kedarku l'shaber ketzad. So this is a brisa that gives us the rules. In its normal course of walking, it damages. All these normalish things that the animal does. Sumchas adds that not only these, but even the case of tzrayros that we until now have been saying is chatzi nezek, and also including the chazer that's going through the garbage and it does damage, are all going to be nezek shalim. For the Gemara hizik pshita, obviously if it's doing damage, it's going to pay nezek shalim. Ela ema hit is v'hizik mishalim nezek shalim. The chazer went ahead and also did a ma'aset tzrayros. Stuff was flying. It's considered nezek shalim. Interesting little Taisus, when Taisus says neiver ba'ashpa, calls it tzrayros to shein, the lanoisaka of it. It's just, we typically think about tzrayros in the context of when the behemoth is walking and there's regel, but now this is even tzrayros to shein. Just something to point out. For the Gemara, tzrayros man de koshmayu. The Tanna Kamma didn't say anything about tzrayros that Sumchus would have to respond to. So the Gemara, as you can imagine, we're missing that part of the brisa. Tzrayros ki urchayu chatzi nezek. That's what the Tanna Kamma would say. The chazer shaya neiver ba'ashpa v'hitis v'hizik mishalim chatzi nezek. So that's what the Tanna Kamma is saying, meaning the chachamim, that it's always me chatzi nezek for tzrayros. And Sumchus Omer tzrayros v'chazer shaya neiver ba'ashpa v'hitis v'hizik mishalim nezek shalim. And we know chatzi nezek tzrayros is a halacha l'moshe misinai. So this is one of the classic kashas on the Rambam that says that you can't have a machlekes by halacha l'moshe misinai. How can you argue that? That's one of the Rambam's klolim. The Netziv, of course, wants to suggest that maybe it never really says in the Gemara it's halacha l'moshe misinai. It's just different. It's just a Kabbalah, and that's not really the same thing as halacha l'moshe misinai. Anyway, you can look at the Maratz over here who deals with that issue. Tana Rabbanan, Tar Negayel Shayim Africhin Min Makom LaMakom. Chickens are moving from place to place. V'shibru kelim b'chnafeihen. Meshalim nezek shalim, that's regular damage. Beruach shvichnafeim, that wind that their flapping wings make, meshalim chati nezek, because that's indirect, that's more like a tzrayros. Sumchas omer nezek shalim, because he holds tzrayros is nezek shalim. Another brisa. Tanya idach tarnagel shayim hadzin al gabia isav al gabia peiros. These are dancing chickens on top of food and fruit. V'tinfu oy nikru, and they ruin it. Meshalim nezek shalim, as you can imagine. Helu offer oy tzrayros meshalim chati nezek. But if tzrayros stuff happened, then they're going to pay chati nezek. Sumchas omer nezek shalim. Tanya idach nacha brisa. Tarnagel it's moving from place to place. And the wind comes out and it breaks kelim mishalim chati nezek, because that's considered indirect in tzrayros. Stama kirabanan. I get sumchus because he holds that this stuff is like it's kayach and therefore it's doing the damage directly. El rabbanan I kegufay dami, then kula nezek by l'shalim. If the rabbanan hold that the kayach is like gufay, then there is no reason why you're not paying nezek shalim. V'ilav kegufay dami chati nezek nami l'shalim. Then it's mamish indirect, and even for tzrayros you wouldn't have to pay chati nezek. So Hadar Marava Elam Kegufay Dami Avad, it is considered Gufay. Over Vachatzi Nezek Troros Hilchas Kamiri law, as we mentioned, this is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and that's why according to the Rabbanan, even though it's considered Kaichai, and therefore it seems like it should be direct hezek from these chickens, but the halacha is it's going to be Chatzi Nezek. And we will stop here and pick it up in Mirza Hashem tomorrow.